Hey everybody, Melissa here, and today we are going to talk about hiring people in your workforce that have disabilities. I'm going to talk about the benefits as to why you should. I'm going to talk about tax credits that the government provides to inspire you to and hire people with disabilities. I'm going to brush up a little bit on the Americans with Disabilities Act. I don't know too much about it, and I'd like to talk about the process if you happen to find yourself on that side of the law. Okay, so when you hire people with disabilities, you are changing the culture that you work for. Can culture change? Yeah, it can. Is it easy? No. It doesn't happen overnight? No, it doesn't. But it is possible. In culture, it doesn't stay the same. Mostly it does. It depends on the values that are, the most important ones. And this is an important value that I think needs to take place. And it will change the culture of your workplace in a good way. The people without disabilities, they will realize, hey, this company really takes care of their people. I want to be a part of that. I want to be taken care of too. And that means that they are going to have a less turnover rate for your non-disabled people. I found 3 great reasons to hire people with disabilities at careeronestop.org. Number 1, you will gain committed employees. People with disabilities are highly dedicated, they are highly productive, and they stay positive a lot longer. This means that people with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, they just want to be included. They want to be there. They want to be making money. They want to be successful just like you and me. When you give them a chance, they're going to appreciate that. Number 2, you will increase the morale of your company. And that isn't just among the employees. If you have retail and you have customers that come in and see that you are taking the time to make these people successful, people are just going to flock to you. They're going to come from miles around just to be a part of that. Number 3, you may be eligible for tax benefits. There's the Disabled Access Credit, there's the barrier removal tax deduction, and there's more. There's also the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, the WOTC, that's what that one's called. That's the one that I came across the most. So we're going to talk about who is eligible for that and what are the highlights. I got this information from www.askearn.org. It's called Employer Incentives for Hiring People with Disabilities. There are 2 purposes for this tax credit. 1, to encourage the hiring of individuals with disabilities. Number 2, to support modifications and accommodations designed to enhance the accessibility of the workplace and productivity of workers with disability. Now, let's talk about who is eligible for this tax credit. Firms that hire workers who have received SSI benefits within 60 days prior to being hired or who are referred to the firm via vocational rehabilitation agency, or better known as a VR agency. If you heard that term, VR agency, vocational rehabilitation agency. What are the highlights of this tax credit? For workers hired under this program, firms are eligible for a 25% reimbursement for first-year wages once the employee has worked 120 hours. It's also for workers who have worked 400 hours have resulted in a 40% reimbursement. And who doesn't like to have free wages? I mean, look at that's money for you in your pocket. Now, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act. I have a lot of homework to do on that. Law and codes, it's very complicated, but it's there to protect us. It's there to protect the employer. It's there to protect the people. It's there to protect property because they're property laws. The section that I chose to talk about is the section about discrimination, because when there is a litigation case with the ADA, it's usually has to do with employment, or it has to do with services and barriers in public places. But since we're talking about hiring people in the workplace with disabilities, we're going to talk about discrimination. So this is Americans with Disabilities Act of 1991 as amended, section 12112. Discrimination. No covered entity shall discriminate against a qualified individual on the basis of disability in regard to job application procedures, the hiring, advancement, or discharge of employees, employee compensation, job training, and other terms, conditions, and privileges of employment. This has to do with you can't discriminate against an employee or a disabled person for trying to be hired. You can't be like, oh, you're disabled, we don't want you here. Don't even bother filling out an application, which unfortunately does happen, and that's why we have these laws. And now I'm going to talk about the process of what would happen when you do start a litigation involving the ADA. I got this information from a woman named Ruth Coulter. She was a student from the Ohio State University of Law. She wrote a paper called Winning and Losing Under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I chose 3 paragraphs from her paper because I didn't want to talk about the losing or the winning part. I just wanted to talk about the process. So there's 3 paragraphs that I'd like to share with you today. The ADA is a broad scope. It comprises of 3 major titles. Employment, Title I. Public entities, Title II. And public accommodations, Title III. Although ADA enforcement can be credited with improvements in the accessibility of public accommodations and increased services by public entities for individuals with disabilities, most of the reported litigation has involved issues of employment discrimination. The ADA employment discrimination litigation is patterned on Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Like CRA Title VII, ADA Title I requires claimants to file a claim of discrimination with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. ADA Title I provides relief comparable to the relief provided under CRA Title VII for claims of disparate treatment and disparate impact discrimination. Moreover, the compensatory damages scheme embodied in the Civil Rights Act of 1991 applies to the ADA, with some exceptions. I'm not sure what those exceptions are. I didn't really go into that, but I would like to know what those exceptions are. Because it borrows from Section 504 and its regulations, the ADA also has some marked differences from CRA Title VII. People can only bring suit under the ADA if they meet the definition of an individual with a disability. That was previously codified in Section 504. Moreover, they are entitled to reasonable accommodations so long as those accommodations do not pose an undue hardship to the employer. And what that means, an undue hardship to the employer is if they needed like a $10,000 work chair in the workplace and the employer just could not afford it. That's what an undue hardship would be. Employers are also allowed some unique defenses, such as that the individual with a disability poses a direct threat to the health or the safety of others. I've heard about a few instances where people with disabilities have become upset and violent in the workplace. It wasn't because they were evil. It was, or they wanted to be violent. They usually had an underlying health problem that when they got help for it, they were totally fine again. Everybody has a bad day. It might be a little bit different for them, but I just wanted you to know that there are some instances where it does happen, and it's not as bad as you think, and but there are rules in place, there are laws in place to protect both the employer and the employee, because there's both ends, If you ever find yourself in a discrimination case, there's so many resources out there. There's a lot of law companies that might actually take your case pro bono and help you out. Now, there's a couple of franchises I'd like to talk about, and it's really sad that I actually had to go to a different country to find examples of companies taking on people with disabilities. I found this company, a franchisee named Mark Wafer. He lives in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. He owns 7 Tim Hortons restaurants, which, if you don't know what a Tim Hortons is, I think it's probably it's probably like our Dunkin' Donuts here in the United States. He owns 7. He has just over 200 employees over his 7 locations. He's been in the business for over 20 years. 94 of his employees have special needs. He's never had one litigation case. He actually, when he had to let go of a woman with disabilities, it was because she was stealing money. It wasn't because of her disability. It was just because of a human mistake that it happens. You know, humans do bad things, and it wasn't because of her disability. He hired, the first one he hired was a young man with Down syndrome, and he decided when he saw him, hey, I'm going to give this man a job. He's a young man just out of school. I'm going to give him a job because I know nobody else will. And his name was Cliff, and he's been working for him for 7-10 years now, I think. And Cliff is one of his best employees. He actually spoke about the turnover rate for people with disabilities is 60. The normal turnover rate is 60 to 90%, where his turnover rate is 38%. A person with non-disabilities, they'll stick around for a year and 3 months, where a person with a disability will stay with him for 7 to 10 years. That's amazing when you think about your bottom line. That greatly cuts down on hiring costs. He was talking about how when you hire a new person, it costs about $4,000 to get them up and running. That's an investment right there. And just for them to leave, you know, they're like, oh, this isn't working out for me. I don't want to be here. You know, thanks for spending $4,000 on me, which I don't even know if people even know that. That's what business people think of. Yeah, he said he never had a litigation case to worry about. And this is one thing that he said that really stuck with me. You think you know what they're capable of, but not until they stand on their 2 feet, they're away from their parents, they get a job, and they have expectations, is when you will see them shine. He really put a lot of emphasis on how we measure people with disabilities on what they can't do. And this is him saying, you don't know what they're capable of. Shove them out there and let's see. You know, he worked very closely with VR agencies. They help the disabled. They teach them to ride a bus. They teach them to get to work on time. They teach them to function at work. And everything has worked out positive for him. People have moved across the country to work at his establishment because of it. A lot more people eat at his establishments. There's really big other business owners of Tim Hortons that are asking him, they want to be on the same boat, but they're afraid. They're like, what's going to happen if it doesn't work out? And he told them, you know, you treat it just like any other business decision. If it doesn't work out, do something about it. It's fine, you know, give him a shot. What do you have to lose? Well, you'd have a lot to lose, but he has a proven track record that it is working. And this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm here right now to tell you about, to try to take that fear away and give these wonderful people a chance in your workplace. The chances of litigation, they're there. Yes, they're there. And they've actually risen in the last year since 2016. But from what it looks like, it's mostly their people are going to the ADA because they are not being hired. It's not because when they get the job, they're being discriminated on there. They are getting the job, and then, well, some of them, they have been getting fired because of it, though. This is something that I'm going to do. This is something I'm going to do for my tribe. I am going to be coming up with a program, and I'm going to present it to tribal council. I haven't really come across very much in disabilities in business law. It's mostly the ADA side, and I haven't really seen anything in policies and procedures. I've looked into the Port Gamble law. I didn't find anything there either, and I've actually been talking with our tribal lawyer, Gina Beckwith, to figure out something that we can do for them. If any of you have anything, any kind of comments, any kind of ideas, please send them to me, email me. Let's talk about this. I want to get this going, and I want to be there for a generation of people that have just been being forgotten about. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, and I hope you really take it into consideration. Bye.